Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson was quite a book. I enjoyed it and thought it was a huge improvement over Rhythm of War. Thank God there's not a chapters upon chapters of detailed fake magic science. And there are plenty of moments that made me gasp. I thought that Shest and Kaladin's I thought Shest and Kaladin's scenes were particularly interesting, as well as learning more about the history of Roshar in the spiritual realm. However, Sanderson's worst tendencies are also on full-on display here in a larger scale than any other previous books. The modern YA casual language the character uses is becoming more and more prevalent. There are jokes about poops, about sprained genitals, and cringy dialogues and banters that will all make your eyes roll out of socket. Sometimes it truly took me out of the book. Sanderson is generally becoming a more extreme version of himself, both in terms of qualities and issues. I know that people love Sanderlange very much, but I've always thought that Sanderson needed to give more payoff throughout the story and not leave most of it in the end. I would much rather have a 1800 pages of well-written book from start to finish than going through a slog of 500 pages of book than having 200 pages of 2 to 300 pages of Sanderlange. Wind of Truth takes the Sanderlange too far. Nearly all the plot lines are waiting to be wrapped up by the end, and it makes all that before setup just too long. So much of the book feels like Sanderson to the extreme. I'm sorry, but 1000 pages of basically nothing just to get to last 150 pages of payoff just doesn't do it for me. This is what happens when fame hits some people. He is surrounded by yes men, and now he loves the smell of his own fart. Stormlight is going wildly downhill, and it's sad because it had massive potential. I didn't love how much more interconnected this one was than the previous books. Before it felt like a standalone series with Easter eggs, but now it feels like I'm missing important things by not reading everything that the cosmere has to offer. I love Kaladin, but I don't like how his stories went from being just about a guy with crippling depressions was just trying to keep on living and doing the right thing to right now being a blatant lecture on mental health. It just got too preachy and pulled me out of the story with all the modern therapy talk. This has started in Rhythm of War and got worse in this book. Find Rail and Venli boring and Gavinar and Renarin excruciating. Shallan was tolerable this time around. So was Lift. Dalanir and Navani were mainly exposition dumps, but I liked finally learning about the history of Roshar. Adeline's plotline and Sneth's backstory was probably the highlight for the book. I think the MCU-fying of the series in terms of connection is down to few factors. The original plans seem to be to keep the various sub-series separate, connected by Hoyt showing up and various Easter eggs. Then one single series later, Dragonsteel would hook everything up, and even that was mostly going by origin stories of Hoyt and the Shattering. But fans seem to respond to the interconnectedness much better than Sanderson was anticipating, to the point the connection becomes much more blatant and obvious. He also dropped Dragonsteel from 7 to 3 books, and he has indicated he is doing some things faster and more directly than originally planned because the series is taking longer than he had hoped for. So I do wonder if the elements of Dragonsteel have gone into Stormlight. I don't know. We do know about the Bridge 4 and the Shattered Plane have already explained. I don't know how much of the Dragonsteel he is willing to transfer it to Stormlight, to make the Stormlight more of the central epic of the series, and Odium has gone from one series bad guy to the Thanos of the Cosmere, with the implication that he will show up in other books before the Stormlight resumes with its 6 installments. There may be various commercial reasons as to why that makes sense. If it wasn't making sense and putting a lot of people off, we would see opposite happening. When he said he wanted to model the Cosmere after the MCU some years ago, I got really worried, but convinced myself that he just meant in terms of making big franchises with multiple series that are intertwined. Wind and Truth made me very sad to realize that the biggest clue he had taken from MCU was the quips and that just happened, this type of cringy dialogue. After having a few days to digest Wind and Truth, I decided I didn't like it that much overall. It wasn't bad, but I feel like that the series was going downhill. Whether that was massively increased in scope, or changes in editing, or increased crossover, or what, I can't just put my fingers on one aspect. Overall, I do know 4 things I don't enjoy. The first was the lore dump. Sanderson is an accomplished builder of worlds and magic system and lore. One of the best things about the previous books, especially the first couple, were the slow drip of revelation which has led to much of the theory crafting and more questions. After that drip, Wind and Truth feel like drinking for a fire hose. There are just so many revelations thrown at us one after another that it just begins to lose the impact. Tangential to the ways that the characters solve problems specifically in the spirit realm, I lost count at how many of them just figured out how something with the vision and connection works. Often on the same page the issue was introduced. In a book where stakes and urgency were so intensely high, this aspect really just worked against it. As Wind and Truth play out over, several of those characters were never in any real danger of dying, but I didn't know that was going on. I do know that they would survive though. The third thing is that many have already commented on, and one thing that Sanderson regularly get criticism was the prose. My issues were more with few specific patterns I kept noticing over and over with every characters, like so many italics. When you use italics as an emphasis so much, they lose all the meaning. On page 942 of the hardcover, there were paragraphs with 4 separate italic words. It had been grating on me. So many ellipses. They are just so common they began to take me out of the story like the italics. Maybe this is because of the change in editor or the speed of writing, a combination of something both, but it really distracted from the experience for me. And the last thing is something others have commented on as well. The central conceit of the story, that it set during 10 days before the following of the event in Rhythm of War. This also fell very flat for me. Much of the book seemed to be written as if there's some sort of small time gaps, and that would have been much more believable. I guess Sanderson backed himself into a corner, given Rhythm of War already established the rules of contest. But Kaladin's reaction to Teft's death was the best and most glaring examples. It was mentioned once or twice, then it just glossed over, despite happening literally yesterday in the context of the book. It's just too jarring. I know that Sanderson said that he will be writing the next book in the next 7 or 8 years, but I believe if you don't like this series that much, this book is really the conclusive of the first arc, even though there are cliffhangers. So you can just take it as an exit point if you don't like the series that much anymore. For me, the first 2 books, Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, are by far the best books Sanderson have written in Stormlight Archive. And after that, I didn't like the series that much. The writing of Sanderson got much worse with each subsequent entries, and it just makes me sad. This series had potential, but I don't think I have much faith going forward. That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching.